please calm down.
Don't tell me to calm down.
Calm down.
Because y'all talk
calm
noise,
down.
and then
You're
can't
out of
take
control.
Because if I
Look,
come,
Chairman,
if I
can
come
we
and
stand
talk
up? Take a
about
break
her,
for 5
y'all
minutes.
gonna have a problem.
Well, you the one talking about. I guess
I think your fake eyelashes are messing up.
No,
what you're
ain't
reading.
nothing.
Hold on.
Listen.
That is absolutely unacceptable. How dare you attack
meeting will
the
suspend,
physical
meeting will
appearance of another
suspend.
person?
Are your
Move
feelings hurt?
her words down.
Aw.
Oh, girl, baby girl.
Oh, really?
Don't even play.
If someone on this committee then starts talking about somebody's bleach blonde, bad built butch body, that would not be engaging in personalities, correct?
What now?
A nearly 1 hour scene of screaming between lawmakers played out last week during a House Oversight Committee hearing. Speaker Mike Johnson condemned the chaos, and even Senator John Fetterman jumped into the fray, drawing comparisons to the Jerry Springer show. But what's come of it? Accusations of racism, disrespect, and even drinking behind the scenes. There's a lot to unpack from what's unraveled after that very chaotic hearing. Joining me now is the Hill's Michael Schnell, the Hill's Capitol Hill reporter as well, to break it all down. Michael, my friend, thank you so much for joining me here today. You know, Jasmine Crockett felt Marjorie Taylor Greene's comments were racist and had this to say on CNN's State of the Union. Let's take a listen.
MAGA has historically been on social media doing the things where they're saying, oh, she's black with lashes and nails and hair, and so she's ghetto. And so to me, this was her buying into that rhetoric and trying to amplify this for the MAGA crowd. And so, yeah, I absolutely think that she only did it to be racist towards me.
So firebrand conservative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who Crockett was talking about there, is known to stir up chaos. But at this point, Michael, can Greene be sanctioned over her comments?
I mean, look, Julia, it's possible if a lawmaker introduced a resolution to censure her on the House floor, if they then went and forced a vote on that resolution to force leadership to deal with it, it is possible we could see a vote on censuring Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. But as far as I have seen, there is no intention to do that, no appetite to do that among Democrats. There has not been a censure resolution worked up, written, introduced, no less, no plans of forcing any votes. But Marjorie Taylor Greene is receiving some bipartisan criticism, as you noted. Speaker Mike Johnson condemning the chaos that played out on Thursday night in the House Oversight Committee. So still a lot of fallout from that hearing. But will there be a formal rebuke of Congresswoman Greene, maybe Jasmine Crockett, and anybody else who was involved? Right now, it does not appear that that will be so.
So you mentioned that fallout, and obviously there was a lot of chatter on Thursday night when this happened, and then that really dragged on into Friday. And on X, I thought it was interesting, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez got into a very heated exchange with her fellow Democratic Senator John Fetterman. Are we seeing blowbacks from Democrats on how AOC and Crockett handled themselves in response to Greene's comments, or is Fetterman sort of a lone wolf here?
I mean, there was some criticism, you know, as you mentioned, John Fetterman. There were also lawmakers just by and large saying that the demeanor, the decorum that was breached at Thursday night's hearing was not right. But look, a lot of Democrats have also said that they needed to step in and stick up for the lawmakers who were being attacked. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez said that she wanted to step up and defend Congresswoman Crockett. So we haven't seen that much pointed criticism at AOC per se, like John Fetterman did, but just in general, overall, lawmakers were not pleased with how that Thursday night hearing went down. Of course, these are elected officials that are supposed to be making really hefty, large decisions on behalf of the American people. And to see a hearing that was on a really important topic, Julia, it was on the question of holding Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress. To have a hearing on that topic devolve into this chaos, it's just nobody on either side of the aisle is saying that was a good look for Congress.
Yeah, and you bring a good point. We're not even talking about Merrick Garland, which was who the hearing was about. And to make the situation even more weird, allegations of drinking behind the scenes have come out of the chaos. You know, although it was made against non-committee members, what exactly was said in those accusations?
Yeah, Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury, who sits on the Oversight Committee, during that hearing had mentioned that there were folks drinking in the hearing room. And now it has been said that it was not actually members of the committee, but rather other members who were sitting in the room for the hearing. But nonetheless, there has been the question of whether or not this will be investigated. There have not been any firm decisions made on that front, no firm announcements there. But just, you know, when you talk about the chaos of Thursday night, it was the fact that it was an evening hearing. So lawmakers were coming into the hearing room after hours of already working throughout the day. It was moved from the morning to the evening because a group of House Republicans wanted to travel up to Manhattan to stand with the former president during his hush money trial. So it was already moved for sort of a politically polarizing reason. And then when you bring in the potential, the fact that it was about a very, again, politically polarizing topic, such as holding Merrick Garland in contempt. I mean, this was just a recipe for chaos. Adding alcohol into the mix definitely doesn't help that situation.
Yeah, talk about a wild Thursday night on Capitol Hill. Want to take a very sharp pivot to some breaking news today. Iran's president and foreign minister were both found dead after their helicopter crashed inside the country's northwestern region. Michael, how could this impact stability in the Middle East and inside Iran, especially after Iran's drone strike on Israel recently and the ties between Iran, Hamas, and Hezbollah?
Yeah, sure. Well, on the first note, this is going to open up who will now lead Iran for the long term. And now for the short term, for now, President Raisi's vice president has been selected by Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, to take over power, to take that power of the presidency in Iran. Now, within the next 50 days, elections do have to be set in Iran to determine a permanent president. So that will bring up a lot of questions of who will be Raisi's successor. Will the supreme leader sort of put his hand on the scale to try to handpick the next president? Will we see sort of maybe an uprising, perhaps from people, from Iranians who want to try to see a democratic regime? A lot of open questions. And of course, hanging over all that is the war in the Middle East and that recent drone strike. So a lot of questions and a lot of eyeballs will be watching how Iran handles this ongoing breaking news situation and what its government will look like when all is said and done.
Yeah, there were some scenes of celebration inside Iran that was on social media, but the regime making it very clear that they're not going anywhere. Staying in the Middle East, the International Criminal Court is seeking arrest warrants against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar on charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Michael, what type of power does the ICC have, and will they actually be able to arrest Sinwar and Netanyahu?
Yeah, well, there are a couple steps here, Julia. First off, the judge has to actually approve these warrants that the ICC said it is requesting. So that's still an open question of if the judge will allow those warrants, greenlight those warrants. And there's a question of actually arresting these folks, Netanyahu, the leader of Hamas, and whatnot, if they will end up being in one of the over 100 countries that is part of the ICC and subscribes to the ICC, where they can be arrested there. And then there would likely be a trial probably held at The Hague. So there are a lot of open questions here. What will happen? I will note that in Israel, there is already blowback to this decision from the ICC. A special committee has been ordered to be created by the Israeli foreign minister to fight back against these charges. So again, another ongoing situation, still kind of breaking as we're seeing developments here. There's a lot of outrage up on Capitol Hill. A lot of House Republicans were quickly hitting back at this decision by the ICC. So definitely something that we're going to have to keep an eye on.
Yeah, the last time I checked, House Republican Conference Chair Lee Stefanik has been hitting back, as well as conservative Congressman Chip Roy. So we'll be watching for more developments there. There was a famous name who helped convince the ICC prosecutors to issue these arrest warrants. Tell us more about who that is.
Yeah, this was a really interesting development that came through just today, earlier today. Amal Clooney was apparently involved in helping convince the ICC to issue these arrest warrants for Netanyahu, for the leaders of Hamas. An interesting figure there getting involved. What that will mean going forward, if she'll speak about this publicly, we'll just have to wait and see. But that was definitely an interesting headline that came across that came across screens today, that Amal Clooney was involved in this process.
Absolutely. Amal Clooney, very much a successful and well-known international lawyer in her own right. So interesting to see that there. So turning back here to the U.S., Trump's criminal trial is coming to an end after testimony from Michael Cohen started to wrap up earlier today. The prosecutor's star witness has had his credibility questioned heavily. And even today, he admitted he stole from the Trump organization. Michael, will this be enough for defense lawyers to sway even one juror into acquitting the former president? I mean, I think at the end of the day, they just need one.
Yeah, well, of course, this has been the question throughout all these proceedings, because you're exactly right. All it takes is one to have a hung jury and no verdict, right? No unanimous verdict right there. So today was really another stunning day of testimony up in Manhattan, with Michael Cohen admitting during this cross-examination that he stole from the Trump organization, and how that affects the jurors. We'll just have to wait and see how they come down. There were reports that the jurors were very attentive during today's arguments, so we'll have to see how this sort of gets wrapped up. Closing arguments will be next week, but no, the one definite thing you can say is this has been a very fascinating trial with twists and turns, with the testimony starting with David Pecker, then Stormy Daniels herself, now Michael Cohen. Days of testimony and cross-examination. It's really going to be fascinating to see how this plays out once it gets to the jury.
Absolutely. And we know that former President Trump, left the courthouse this weekend and he was campaigning. He suggested that he could be a third-term president if he wins election in November. Break this down for us. This obviously isn't constitutional, but would you say this is a threat that he would go as far to undermine the Constitution and fight for a third term?
I mean, I don't really think so, because it's not, as you mentioned, constitutionally legal, right? You're only allowed to run to serve in the presidency in the White House as president for 2 terms. There was all this question about what would happen if Trump objected to the results of the 2020 presidential election. And of course, he cast doubt on them. And there was the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol, which was a very large event and a very disruptive event, a deadly event. But after that, at the end of the day, Trump left office. So despite all those threats and this coup that happened at the United States Capitol, he did leave office because constitutionally, legally, he had to leave the White House. So I think that this is just posturing from him. It's something in a way to rev up his base. If it's a threat, I don't actually think so, because again, it's not actually legal. He can't actually do it.
Yeah, absolutely. We know that his base likes to hear, him posturing and, these types of comments. Want to move over to the Biden campaign. Vulnerable Senate Democrats are distancing themselves from the president after a series of polls showed Biden trailing Trump in several battleground states. How bad are these numbers for Biden right now, and what type of strategy are these Democrats working towards? I think it's interesting, Michael, because some of these vulnerable Senate Democrats are oftentimes running ahead of Biden in their states.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not a great dynamic, because for the current president running for re-election, already a lot of folks casting doubt on his candidacy, on his age, his vulnerabilities when it comes to the situation in the Middle East and the situation at the southern border. He needs all hands on deck and all people behind him in the Democratic Party if he is going to want to clinch another term in the White House come November. So the fact that some of these vulnerable Senate Democrats are trying to distance themselves from him, not a great look. But look, I mean, this is just how politics is, right? Sometimes you have more of those figures who are running in more moderate districts, where tying themselves to the president, to the whoever's occupying the White House at that time, is not necessarily the best way to win. So, I mean, it all just comes down to politics and strategy and what the best strategy is for each individual candidate. But when you look at this as a whole and from the lens of President Biden's reelection campaign, you of course want more support than less support, and you want your entire team united behind you. So not great that some Senate Democrats are distancing themselves. But again, this is not some newfound thing. This happens because each individual candidate needs to run the race that's right for their district.
So sticking with Senate Democrats and political strategy, Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is getting ready for round 2 of the bipartisan border bill this week. Michael, does this have any chance of making movement, or is this more of a political ploy to get Republicans in the Senate on the record showing they are against border legislation? I'll remind viewers that we know Republicans are the ones trying to go on the offense on the issue of the southern border.
Yeah, to put it bluntly and to put it clearly, no, this has no chance of moving, whether it's in the Senate or in the House or getting to President Biden's desk, being signed into law. This is not going anywhere, Julia. And the purpose of it is exactly what you said. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer wants to, A, flip the switch on Republicans, be able to message across the country that Republicans shot down once again an opportunity to address the situation at the southern border. And B, he also wants to give some of those vulnerable Senate Democrats Democrats. John Tester is top on that list in the opportunity to cast another vote on the record in support of doing something about the situation at the southern border. And look, Schumer nodded to those dynamics in his letter to colleagues last night, saying, I understand that we are going to lose Republicans. I understand that we are going to even lose some Democrats. But in order to make progress on a politically prickly topic like immigration and like the situation at the southern border, there's going to need to be bipartisan cooperation. And that he sees in his eyes is everyone getting on board with this bipartisan border deal. But again, it's not going to go anywhere. It didn't back in February when it was tied to the foreign aid bill. Not going to happen this time around. But again, as we get closer to the November election, the leaders in both chambers are going to try to use the floor action to their advantage, put messaging bills on the floor. That's exactly what we see Schumer doing right now.
Michael Schnell from the Hills, Capitol Hill team. Good stuff as always. Thank you.
Thanks, Julia.
2 Republican senators announced Monday that they will be introducing legislation to protect in vitro fertilization nationwide. It comes after the Alabama Supreme Court ruled earlier this year that embryos created by IVF are children. That ruling created legal confusion and temporarily shut down the practice in the state. The 2 sponsors are Texas Senator Ted Cruz and Alabama Senator Katie Britt. They say the bill will clear up that confusion. Shortly after the decision from the Alabama Supreme Court, 4 Senate Democrats drafted their own legislation to protect access to IVF. Efforts to pass that legislation have been blocked by Republicans. And Wikileaks founder Julian Assange will likely stay in British custody for the foreseeable future. A UK court ruled Monday that he will be allowed to appeal his extradition to the US, despite assurances that he would not face the death penalty. The decision comes after 2 months after the same court ruled Assange could only appeal his extradition if the US did not guarantee First Amendment protections for Assange. Assange's legal team said Monday that the US gave blatantly inadequate assurances that he would be protected. Assange was indicted on espionage charges after publishing classified military intelligence on Wikileaks back in 2010. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Julia Manchester. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hills YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.